All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to get into some really powerful ideas from the book Animal Spirits by George Akerlof and Robert Schiller. It's this fascinating look at how our own human psychology, the messy, sometimes irrational stuff, is actually the secret force pulling the levers of the entire global economy.
So let's kick things off with a moment I'm sure we all remember. The 2008 financial crisis and, well, this pretty blunt explanation for it. Now, it's a simple statement, right? But it actually points to something way, way deeper about what was really going on.
And that's the real mystery here. I mean, for decades, economic theory hammered home this idea that markets are rational, that people, like you and me, make logical choices based purely on self-interest. Okay, but if that's true, how on earth did the party get so out of hand that it nearly tanked the entire world economy? It just doesn't add up.
So to figure that out, we've got to look at the standard story, the one that dominated economic thinking for so long, and see exactly why it left us totally unprepared for what was coming.
So on one hand, you had the traditional view, this idea of a perfect, invisible hand keeping everything in balance. It's all rational, it's all efficient. But then you have the reality of 2008. Panic, collapse, people making decisions based on raw fear, not some logical calculation. The old story was clearly, absolutely missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
And here's the kicker. The key to this whole puzzle, it wasn't some brand new groundbreaking theory. Nope. It was actually a powerful idea from one of the most famous economists ever, an idea that had been basically tossed aside and forgotten. Okay, so way back in 1936, right in the middle of the Great Depression, John Maynard Keynes comes up with this idea of animal spirits to explain how things really work. But then, over the next few decades, the world of economics wanted to be more like a hard science, right? So they kind of watered down his theory. They took out all the messy psychology stuff, and by the 70s, poof, the whole idea of animal spirits was pretty much gone, written out of the textbooks.
But Keynes himself, he got it. He knew we aren't just walking calculators. He understood that, yeah, sure, a lot of what we do is rational, but there's this other huge part of our decision-making that's driven by these animal spirits. Our gut feelings, our human instincts, all the stuff that isn't strictly logical.
All right, so let's break it down. What Akerlof and Schiller did was take this old idea from Keynes and bring it into the 21st century. They pinpointed 5 key psychological forces, 5 animal spirits that are secretly steering our economic decisions.
So here they are: confidence, fairness, corruption and bad faith, money illusion, and stories. Think of these 5 things as a kind of hidden psychological software running in the background. It shapes everything we do, often in ways that those old standard economic models just can't see coming.
First up, you've got confidence. And we're not just talking about a number on some consumer index. This is a gut feeling. It's that impulse that just tells you things are on the up and up, which makes you want to invest or expand your business, or, well, spend. It's exactly what led someone to drop over $1 million on a house in a pretty remote Norwegian city. That one sale, it was a tiny whisper of a massive global real estate bubble that was being pumped up by this exact spirit.
Okay, next up is fairness. Think about it. We're basically hardwired with a strong sense of what's fair and what isn't. And we will often walk away from a deal that feels unfair, even if it makes perfect economic sense on paper. This snow shovel example is perfect. Basic supply and demand says the price should go up after a blizzard, right? But a whopping 82% of people look at that and say, nope, that's just wrong. It's price gouging.
And this sense of fairness has huge real-world effects, especially when it comes to what people get paid. I mean, just look at this. These are hourly wages for truck drivers in Boston back in 1951. The guys delivering magazines were making almost twice as much as the guys delivering laundry. Was it because they were more skilled? No. It was all about these powerful, unwritten rules about what seemed fair to pay someone in that specific industry.
All right, the third spirit, corruption and bad faith. Here's a simple truth about capitalism. It's amazing at making what we want. But if what we want is snake oil, well, it's going to produce a whole lot of snake oil. Booming economies are the perfect breeding ground for this. They create cover for people acting in bad faith to, misrepresent what something is worth, use some creative accounting to pump up the price, and then cash out, leaving everyone else holding the bag when it all comes crashing down. Number 4 is something called money illusion, and it's a mental trap we all fall into. We get fixated on the face value of money, the number on the bill, and we forget to think about its real inflation-adjusted value. This sign is a perfect, almost funny example. $50 was the fine for spitting on a train in Boston, set way back in 1968. Today, that $50 is, well, it's not nothing, but because of inflation, it's lost almost all of its power to actually stop someone from doing it.
And finally, we have stories. Humans are storytelling creatures. It's how we make sense of the world, and a powerful economic story can spread like wildfire. Just think about the 2000s boom. You had this narrative of get rich quick, go-go capitalism, and a show like The Apprentice was the perfect vehicle for it. It went global. The faces changed, the countries changed, but the core story was the same everywhere, and it was pumping up economic confidence all around the planet.
So here's the really crucial point. These animal spirits, they aren't just fascinating little quirks of human psychology. No, they are the missing keys. They're what we need to unlock the answers to some of the biggest, most stubborn puzzles in the entire field of economics.
Okay, let's take one of the biggest paradoxes out there. Why are there people who can't find a job? I mean, standard economic theory says that if you have someone who's unemployed but willing to work for less than the current wage, a company should just hire them, right? It'd lower their costs. So, why doesn't that happen? Why are there always people looking for work?
Well, the answer comes right back to one of our animal spirits: fairness. This idea, the efficiency wage theory, explains it perfectly. Employers know that if they pay a wage that feels deeply unfair, even if a desperate person would take it, they're probably going to end up with a bitter, unmotivated, and unproductive employee. So, to keep morale and productivity high, they intentionally pay more than the lowest possible wage. And that simple act creates a permanent gap between the number of available jobs and the number of people who want one.
Okay, so let's zoom out. What happens when you put all of these pieces, all these animal spirits together? Well, you get a completely new way of seeing the entire economic system, and with it, a really different idea about the role government should play.
For decades, mainstream economics basically lived in that neat little box on the left, a world of perfectly rational people behaving like perfect robots. But the brilliant insight from Akerlof and Schiller is that to understand the real world, you can't just live in one box. You have to look at the whole picture. The economy is driven by us, by real people with all of our messy emotions, our irrational quirks, and our very human motivations.
And that brings us to the big takeaway. Look, capitalism is an absolutely incredible engine for creating wealth. But it's a game played by humans who are emotional, who believe in stories, who have a strong sense of fairness. And just like any high-stakes game, it needs a referee. Someone to set the rules and step in to make sure our own animal spirits don't cause the whole thing to spiral out of control.
So, that leaves us with one final big question to think about. If we accept that these animal spirits are just part of who we are, then the debate isn't really about whether capitalism is good or bad. The real question is, knowing what we know about ourselves, how do we design the rules and the institutions that actually account for our psychology? How do we make sure this incredibly powerful system works for all of us, and not just for the people who happen to catch a ride on the next bubble?